If you've got rheumatoid arthritis, you'll see a rheumatologist. If you've got a hormone issue, you'll see an endocrinologist. But what we know is that what your label is doesn't really matter. The same factors are at play in almost every disease. So what we need to start doing is looking at the root cause of these diseases and treat the underlying cause, because just by pruning the canopy of the tree, you're never going to fix the underlying biochemical abnormalities in the patients. So as a practitioner, and even if you think about your friends that have some kind of illness, most of them are sick, they've got, they get infections, they have terrible trouble with their digestive system, they've got mood disorders. A lot of people are very sensitive to foods and other toxins, so many people have issues with perfumes and chemical sensitivities. Many people are too stressed, and most people that we see in practice have problems maintaining a healthy body weight. And it doesn't really matter what food you eat now. We counted calories for so long. There are underlying biochemical disturbances that will make you gain weight regardless of what you're eating. So when we look at integrative approaches to complex health issues, I always say, this is a nice way to describe it. Our diet, our lifestyle and our environment will interact with our genes and our microbiome, and this will affect all of these processes in the body. So our hormone balance, our metabolic function, our immune system, how toxic we are, how much energy we generate in our cells, our nutrient status, our gut function and our neurotransmitters. And all of these have an impact on every single chronic disease. And at a cellular level, you get abnormalities in processes called inflammation, oxidation, our diets are way too acidic, and a process called methylation, which I won't be talking too much about today. Because what I wanted to do is show that we can use a test such as oligoscan that we're demonstrating tonight to highlight one of these issues. So for all of these processes to drive in a normal way, we need adequate nutrients, and minerals are of key importance here. And then when we have toxic elements or heavy metals, this can actually block many of the biochemical processes that happen in the body. So toxicity, my way of describing it, is a system that's overwhelmed by an increased exposure to an increasing number and amounts of heavy metals, environmental pollutants and endocrine disruptors. And at the same time, we've got a decline in the nutrients in our food that we need to assist with our detoxification processes. So if you can think about, it's our total toxin load. So it's the type and amount of toxin added to the length of exposure, and you subtract the detoxification capacity of your body. This will mean that you've got a total toxin load. So your toxins can flow into this bucket. If you have a good ability to clear them, then they will drip out of the bucket. But if this bucket overflows, that's when you're going to get symptoms. And that's determined by your genetics. But it's also, toxicity is about how the body deals with the level and not the level itself. Because one level in one person can mean something different in somebody else. So our bodies haven't evolved to cope with the current level of toxin exposure. And as Andrew mentioned, there's so many more new chemicals being added to our environment all the time. And in the past few generations, this has been an unprecedented level from industry, including heavy metals. And in addition, many of us have genetic variants in the enzymes that we need to detoxify these chemicals. So it's the dose that makes the poison. And this was an interesting paper that was published out of the US, and it was highlighting the problem with heavy metals and toxicity in the environment. And this paper concluded that toxicity depends on several factors, including the dose, the route of exposure and the chemical species. For example, mercury, methyl mercury, is much more toxic than inorganic mercury, as well as the age, gender, genetics and nutritional status of the exposed individual. And because of their high degree of toxicity, arsenic, cadmium, lead and mercury rank among the priority metals that are of both public health significance. And these metallic elements are considered systemic toxicants that are known to induce multiple organ damage, even at lower levels of exposure. This was another study out of the US that showed dietary sources of methylated arsenic species in between 2003 and 2010. And the highest sources were found in fish, rice, rice crackers and rice milk. So this suggests that there's significant groundwater contamination. And in Australia, we don't do much better. So you want to obviously make sure that if you are going to eat poultry and pork, you eat it from good sources and not the high yield farming, that a lot of these will have these substances in them. So without going into too much science, when we get rid of a compound in the body, our detoxification processes occurs in 3 phases. So we have a toxin that's activated, then it's conjugated to make it soluble in water so we can get rid of it from the body, and then it's excreted through the bile or the urine. The thing is, these processes are incredibly nutrient dependent. So if you have any nutrient depletions, this will slow this process. They can be massively overwhelmed in terms of if you're trying to get rid of toxins and you're also introducing things like alcohol and tobacco smoke, that's going to just completely overwhelm the system. But they're also very energy dependent, so we need to make sure that we provide the nutrients for our mitochondrial function and good cellular health. You probably can't see this, but this is just to show the numerous number of nutrients that are required at every stage in these detoxification processes. So you have to think about getting the good nutrients from your food, and most of the time, if you've got an issue with toxicity, I would actually recommend that you give good liver support. But also you need to support gut health, because your gut is a route of where you get rid of toxins that the liver has worked so hard to remove from the body. If you have an inflamed gut or you have any abnormal bacteria, then they will actually pull apart these conjugated toxins here and you just recirculate them through the body. So it's very important not just to think about the liver when we think about detoxification, which is why if you think back to the original slide that I put up, it's a combination of many of these factors that we have to think about in functional medicine. So some common symptoms of toxicity, well, these are probably present in most of the chronically ill patients that we see. Maybe they're not definitive enough to say, well, this person has been diagnosed with celiac disease, but they may have many multiple foods that they react to. But basically, these are the symptoms that we would see in many of our patients. When we think about toxicity as well, the body makes fat to store toxins away, to get them out of the system. And many of our current modern toxins, they are stored in your fat, so your body will make fat to take them out of the system. So I thought this was a very interesting graphic. This shows from the early 1900s the decline in many of the minerals in our soils and our food. And at the same time, we've got a massive increase in cancer, asthma, cardiovascular disease, and many other diseases. And Dr. Linus Pauling, two-time Nobel Prize winner, stated that you can trace every sickness, every disease, and every ailment to a mineral deficiency, and sick soils mean sick plants, sick animals, and sick people. And this was, I found this fascinating too, that in order to receive the same amount of iron that you used to get from an apple in 1950, which is 4.3 milligrams, by 1998 you had to eat 26 apples to get the same amount.
You're 52 now.
So why has this happened? Well, this is a bit of history actually that is also very interesting. Several factors have played key roles in our declining food nutrient values, with significant drops in crucial minerals like phosphorus, selenium, copper, magnesium, cobalt, calcium, zinc and iron, which are all required to help get rid of toxicity. And the start of mechanised farming in 1925, minerals were being depleted faster than the microbes in the soil could replenish them for the next year's growth. Then we had the introduction of ammonium nitrate fertiliser in 1946, and this stimulates greater yield of plants, but the soil chemistry changes and that locks up many of the minerals, making them unavailable to the plants. Sadly, the use of pesticides, herbicides and fungicides started prior to 1960, and while this kills a lot of pests and fungi, it also kills the soil microbes. And the introduction of the genetically engineered plants and glyphosate in the 90s, this hyperchelates the minerals, so it takes any that you've got left out and it makes them unavailable to plants. And from that slide here, you can see the introduction of GMO and glyphosate. We've got a massive increase here. Additionally, with processing of foods, when we polish rice to make the white rice, or we refine refined white flour, or we take the sugar cane and we make it into the white sugar, we take away some vital trace minerals, chromium, vanadium and molybdenum, and these are the very minerals that you need to process carbohydrate. So by eating these processed type foods, you're removing what you need to metabolise them. So what can we do? Well, obviously we need to reduce exposure, and that means foods, personal care products, occupational exposures, and obviously water. And it's estimated that by the time the average woman grabs her morning coffee, she has applied 126 different chemicals in 12 different products to her face, body and hair. So we're not only talking about minerals and heavy metals, we're talking about you're overwhelming your system with all of these toxic chemicals that your body has to get rid of. And many of these compounds in personal care products are endocrine disruptors. And I mean, that's a whole topic for another day, but they're massively important in contributing to chronic disease. And when you're looking at reducing exposure, 1 + 1 + 1 equals 20. So low levels of individual chemicals, while seemingly they might not seem important, when you add them together they are synergistic and they cause a lot more problems than low levels of individual ones alone. We have certain things that will increase the effect of toxins. So everybody gets told they need to exercise more, but it's quite interesting in terms of when we think about muscle contraction. Now, the lymphatic system is one of the main ways that you remove toxins from the tissues and get them out of the body. And the lymphatic system, unlike the blood system, doesn't have a pump, doesn't have a heart, and it doesn't have vessels that contract. So the only way you can improve lymphatic flow is by muscle contraction, which is why lymphatic massage can work in a lot of instances. The other thing that exercise does, that it actually tells your muscle to make more mitochondria, and that's very important for your detoxification pathways, not only to provide some of the substrates, but actually to provide the energy that your body needs to remove them. So obviously if we've got a sluggish liver or kidney problems, that's going to contribute to not detoxifying but also excreting the toxins. Intestinal dysfunction and the microbiome, as I briefly mentioned before, you need a very good functioning gut and a microbiome to help you eliminate toxins. The microbiome also contributes to the synthesis many of the compounds we need for our bodies to actually perform correctly. We want to eat a diet high, eating a diet high in processed foods and fat is a terrible decision because of the lack of nutrients and also the toxicity and the additives and preservatives and all of those things that ends up contributing to your overall toxic load. Excessive consumption of caffeine, alcohol, tobacco use and regularly taking prescription or over-the-counter medications, again, that just adds to the number of compounds that your liver has to work on. So if it's working hard on these, it doesn't have much reserve left to get rid of your heavy metals and your environmental pollutants. So finally, what can we do? Well, it's about knowing your status. Heavy metals and essential minerals we can measure with the oligoscan. We can measure things like environmental pollutants, including now glyphosate. We can look at nutrient status, so the nutrients that we need to support detoxification pathways. So we can look at things like urine organic acids, which is going to give us a functional status of your nutrients. This came up a little bit earlier in discussion. You might have plenty of B12 in your blood when it's measured, but if you look at the urine and you measure a metabolite of one of the reactions that B12 participates in, then you can actually get a functional assessment of whether the B12 you've got is actually working. We can look at the genetic variants in many of the detoxification genes that code for the enzymes that we need to remove these from our bodies, and also the methylation pathways. A lot of people have heard of MTHFR. That's just one of the methylation genes. And obviously we can assess the gut health and the microbiome. We have laboratories that offer testing to measure markers of digestive health, markers of intestinal permeability, and also sequence the specific bacteria that are there. So the oligoscan, which is our featured test tonight, basically you want to know what you need more of to help remove what you need less of. So I'll hand you over now to Marion.